I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Capella University is rethinking higher education. With its game-changing FlexPath learning format, you can earn your degree on your schedule and fit your education seamlessly into your life. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
What's the point?
Well, do you think you're different in any way from how you were when you were 21?
Yes, but it's hard to know how I would have been without therapy, for instance. You never really know. It's like you can't prove a negative, so I don't really know. But I'll tell you how I use it, and you can tell me if I'm using's the wrong word, but I really like my therapist, and she's helped me an enormous amount in very difficult situations. But I sort of feel like a therapist is a statistician. So you've seen 1,000 situations similar to whatever situation I'm going through. And so you see, well, in half of those situations, people did this and it turned out horribly. And in the other half, they did this and it turned out great. So I tell you my situation, you put it in the right category that you've seen thousands of times, and then you tell me what people did in the 50% or 10% or 12% that where it turned out great, and then I follow your advice.
I think therapy is more like getting a really good second opinion about the choices that you're making and why you're stuck in the way that you're stuck. So a lot of times we have theories about our own lives. This is the reason that X didn't work out. This is the reason why I'm having trouble in relationships. This is the reason why I'm stuck in my career, whatever it is. This is the reason why I kept getting into the same situation over and over. And you might have a theory about it, but whatever your theory is, if you keep ending up in the same situation, you're probably a little bit off. And a therapist with that second opinion can help you see your blind spots. And I think that that's what's really important. And so I would guess that if your therapy is doing anything for you, that you've learned something about your patterns. You've learned something about your behavior, particularly in terms of the way you relate to yourself and the way that you relate to other people. By the way, I guess we have the same agent, I guess, or I don't know. Yeah.
Oh yeah? She didn't tell me. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's great. She is, we're recording because I'm going to say this about Suzanne Gluck. Suzanne Gluck is like, I didn't think agents could do anything that I couldn't do. Like I could call up all the publishers or I could just self-publish a book. And so, but Suzanne and I had been meeting for years. She kept saying, why don't you publish mainstream? I had published mainstream from 2000 to 2012, and then I started self-publishing, and I just figured, I could just do this on my own. What can you do for me that I can't do? And then finally I said to her, okay, let's try something. Here's my idea for a book. She did an unbelievable job. I've never seen that at all. Like I could see why she's the best agent in the business.
What's your book?
Well, it's going to be called Skip the Line, And it's about how you could, at any age, you could basically start a new career, reinvent yourself, try to learn a new skill that's a competitive skill. And there are ways to essentially skip the line so you can, as quickly as possible, whether it's learning or whether it's getting the right jobs or the right money or whatever, you can get to the top 1% of that field. And so I kind of tell a lot of my stories, but I also kind of describe how I think the 10,000 hour rule is wrong, and I define what I call the 10,000 experiment rule. And I go, there's just a lot of stories, and a lot of techniques sort of fall out of those stories, and it's all from either personal experience or people I've spoken to or whatever. So,
Wow, I'll definitely read it.
And Suzanne doesn't know yet that the title "Skip the Line." She pitched it as "Try This," but I just met with her yesterday. We changed it to "Skip the Line." So.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But anyway, now about your book, which is somewhere on my bookshelf, but now I'll have to find it. Say the title, because I always forget the
It's
titles.
called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone.
Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. You were on my podcast twice before the book came out, and it's your story, both as a therapist dealing with patients and then going to therapy and having that experience yourself, and the stories kind of running in parallel. And interweaving with each other, the stories of you with all your patients, the stories of you and the relationship with your therapist. Just a well-written book. Could have been a riveting novel, but instead it's actually the true story of you, and a great book. And not only a great book, and I'm not the first person to say, or I'm not the only person to say it, your book was like the third most sold audiobook of 2019, right? Something like that.
It's been on the New York Times list since it came out in April, and now it's 9 months later.
Yeah, not an easy task. So a lot of people sort of like blip into the New York Times bestseller list, and then they're out, but they call themselves a New York Times bestseller for the rest of their lives. You actually could be a New York Times bestseller for the rest of your life. So this book is having a long life.
Yeah, it has a lot of word of mouth, which is the great thing. So many people are reading it, and then they're telling their friends to read it, or they're buying it for their friends.
At what point did you feel, okay, wow, I've spent like years and years on this book, I've had all this sort of, tragedy that you kind of discussed in the book, and now suddenly, when did you realize, oh, this might change my life?
I don't know that it's changed my life. I think that it's more that it's doing what I wanted it to do, which is to change other people's lives.
Good answer.
Well, it's true though. I mean, I think this was the book that, I was supposed to be writing 2 other books that were, I never wrote. And one was the book about the How to Land Your Kid in Therapy, which was this Atlantic piece. It was an Atlantic cover, and everybody wanted me to write that. And then I was supposed to be writing a happiness book, and the happiness book made me depressed and miserable.
What was your book on happiness? I feel like that's a category that is a lot of people have done that.
They have, and a lot of people have done it really well. But I think that I was coming at it from the point of view of a therapist who goes in every day, and I see real life, and I see people, and I see what makes them live the kind of life that they want to live. And it's not so much a conversation about happiness. I think happiness as a byproduct of living your life a certain way is what most people want. And I think happiness as the goal in and of itself is kind of a recipe for disaster. And so, I think that the happiness book couldn't really capture the richness and the nuance and all of the inspiring stories too that I see in the therapy room that again are more about how we grow and change and all the work we have to do, which isn't so much what a happiness book is about.
Well, okay, that leads to the question, so I've been going to therapy since I was 21 and 52 now, so for 31 years. And what's the point?
Well, do you think you're different in any way from how you were when you were 21?
Yes, but it's hard to know how I would have been without therapy, for instance. You never really know. It's like you can't prove a negative, so I don't really know. But I'll tell you how I use it, and you can tell me if I'm using is the wrong word, but I really like my therapist, and she's helped me an enormous amount in very difficult situations. But I sort of feel like a therapist is a statistician. So you've seen 1,000 situations similar to whatever situation I'm going through. And so you see, well, in half of those situations, people did this and it turned out horribly. And in the other half, they did this and it turned out great. So I tell you my situation, you put it in the right category that you've seen thousands of times, and then you tell me what people did in the category in the 50% or 10% or 12% that where it turned out great, and then I follow your advice.
I think therapy is more like getting a really good second opinion about the choices that you're making and why you're stuck in the way that you're stuck. So a lot of times we have theories about our own lives. This is the reason that X didn't work out. This is the reason why I'm having trouble in relationships. This is the reason why I'm stuck in my career, whatever it is. This is the reason why I kept getting into the same situation over and over. And you might have a theory about it, but whatever your theory is, if you keep ending up in the same situation, you're probably a little bit off. And a therapist with that second opinion can help you see your blind spots. And I think that that's what's really important. And so I would guess that if your therapy is doing anything for you, that you've learned something about your patterns. You've learned something about your behavior, particularly in terms of the way you relate to yourself and the way that you relate to other people.
I think that's definitely true. I think, like, I take notes during my therapy because sometimes she says something that, because it's what you just said. It's, looking at something in a different way that I'm used to. I get into this pattern of looking at a situation, and then she says, well, maybe you should look at it. You should consider looking at it this way. Or one technique of hers is to say, well, what if this was happening to one of your children? What advice would you give? And then suddenly, like, the answer becomes clear because, well, obviously I would say this, and that turns out to be how I should be looking at it, which was completely different than how I was looking at it. So I think, yes, there's a lot of ways that she's helped. And, again, it's hard to say what I would have done otherwise, but I noticed this in your articles. In your articles, somebody will present a problem and they kind of want to know, let's say, should I break up with this person or not break up with this person? And you kind of twist it around. And I'm thinking of the article we just spoke about where the roommate was having an affair against her boyfriend with her roommate. And you sort of have a way of, and you do this in a lot of articles, you sort of have a way of saying, well, what in you chose this situation? Rather than saying, should I break up with her or not? You say, well, before you get to that, I'm paraphrasing you. Before you get to that, how about you ask yourself, why are you choosing someone unavailable? Why were there issues of self-worth, or did you see this with your parents or whatever? Like, you kind of sort of teach them to look in a different way.
Well, I think so often we're so curious about why somebody else is doing something, and we don't look at why we're doing something. So in this case, this was a kid in college, and his roommate had a boyfriend, and the roommate was also sleeping with him, and he wanted a relationship with her, and he couldn't understand why she would keep having this affair with him and not break up with her boyfriend. And he was so concerned about what was going on with her. And I said, well, what's going on with you? Have you given, if we spent as much time trying to figure out what we're doing as opposed to what other people are doing, our time would be much better spent.
I mean, it's interesting because I think I don't know if everybody's been in the exact same situation. We've probably all been in like similar or parallel sorts of situations. And that really, your answer really resonated with me. Like for me, I could say in a parallel situation, there was a self-worth issue as opposed to like always thinking like, well, why did she say this? Or why is she doing this? Or why this? You can't really ask why. Sometimes you have to sort of look in the mirror and say, why about your own self? Like, what's going on here? Like, why do I think this is the only option good for me when there's plenty of other options in the world?
Right.
Or plenty of other situations I could be in rather than this situation.
Right. And in his case, I think what was happening was what happens to a lot of people, which is that a lot of people seek out partners who are going to validate their worst insecurities if they haven't worked through them. And so for him, that's exactly what was happening. So, I think it was so much less about, whether she was going to break up with her boyfriend. And he was taking it so personally of like, why is the boyfriend better than me? And the bigger question is, why are you obsessed over this woman who's not available?
And do you ever get a sense like, does he ever write you back and say, okay, you're right, here's what I did? Because you even say in the article, you say you know what you should do. Mm-hmm. Because it's sort of obvious he should end that situation. He should end that relationship. But it's obvious to the outside, but people in it never see that. Nobody ever listens to their friend's advice, for instance. Probably rarely they listen to their therapist's advice. Maybe not, but I don't know. But did you ever get a sense of the conclusion of these things?
Yeah, I think what's great about the Dear Therapist column is that a lot of times people will write to me later and say, "Here's what I did." It might not come right away because they need time to act on whatever the advice was, but I think that's unfortunately the reader doesn't get that conclusion. And in this new podcast that I'm doing, we're gonna be able to do that. I'm doing a new podcast with that Katie Kirk's producing for iHeart. With another therapist, Guy Winch, who you might know from his great TED Talks. He has a great TED Talk about how to mend a broken heart, and another one about an emotional toolkit. And he's really funny and he's really smart. And so we are going to have somebody write in, and we're going to talk about the letter kind of behind the scenes, the way therapists talk about it. And we'll go back to the person and give them our thoughts. And then they will go do whatever they do. And then they're going to come back and tell us how it worked out.
So what's the name of this podcast?
It's called Dear Therapists.
And Dear Therapists, plural.
Yeah, so you can write to advice@iheartmedia.com, and maybe your letter will be on our podcast.
And what's the first episode about? Like, have you've done it? Are you just coming from it now, right? So,
we just taped it recently, yeah.
And what was it about?
It is actually about a husband who is cheating, and the wife doesn't, and they're going to couples therapy, and the wife has a lot of questions about what's going on.
Does she know that the husband's cheating? Or
yes, she does. That's why she wrote in, yeah.
Okay, but they're still together?
They are, but I can't. I don't want to give it away because we're going to talk about it on the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in general, in your life, what's been going on? You're doing all these media things. Are you doing therapy? You a therapist?
I am a therapist, yeah. So I do have the private practice in Los Angeles, and I write the column, and we're doing the TV show of Maybe You Should Talk to Someone.
What's that going to be like?
Exciting.
I had no idea you're doing a TV show.
Yeah. So the TV show is with Eva Longoria's company, and do you know the show The Americans?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the creators of The Americans are writing the pilot right now.
That's excellent. So is it going to be kind of sitcom-ish a little bit?
No. I think the tone of Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, there's a lot of humor in it, but nobody is ever made fun of, or we're not making fun of anybody. I think that the reason that it resonates so much is because it's so real. And we see the ridiculousness of the human condition in it. So that's where the humor comes from, is we're all ridiculous when we go through certain things.
Well, just the situation, even with this letter with the roommate and the affair and so on. Again, it's interesting because always outside the situation, it's like situations are in bubbles where people inside the bubble don't know that they're in this, Truman Show type of world where there's a whole other world outside of it. And outside, that's why friends always give good advice, but the people in the bubble always ignore it.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't think friends give good advice. And in the book, I talk about the difference between idiot compassion and wise compassion. And idiot compassion is what our friends do. They go along with your version of the story.
Oh, so usually my friends tell me I'm an idiot, but
do they?
I'm the idiot, yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. A lot of times, maybe it's a gender thing, because a lot of women will say to their friends, like, yeah, you're right. He's a jerk, or your boss should have promoted you, or whatever it is, and that's not that helpful. What people need is wise compassion, which might be what your friends are giving you, but I don't know about the compassion part, because they're kind of telling
wise,
you.
But I don't know.
That's funny. I think they're wise, but maybe not compassionate.
Saying, like, you're an idiot, and I'm like, but I didn't tell you the problem yet. Doesn't matter. You're just an idiot. So, but yeah. So I don't know if it's wise, or compassionate, but they definitely tell me the right, or in many cases, they tell me what they think.
Yeah. But I think sometimes our friends are afraid of hurting our feelings. So they don't really say, that's the 10th time this thing has happened to you. Maybe you're the common denominator in this situation.
Yeah, no, I think that, and that's always an interesting thing to look at, because, whatever the situation, like, a relationship didn't work out. Sometimes people come to me and they say, this relationship didn't work out. She was a narcissist. But then every relationship's like the opposite side always seems to be a narcissist. And I'm like, what? I don't understand. Like, why is everybody in the world a narcissist? Like, that's like the catchphrase on somebody's, it could be on all of the other relationships. And I almost want to say, I'm being the idiot compassion friend here. I almost want to say, maybe you should look at like why everybody's a narcissist. Maybe you're the narcissist. But I never say that.
Right. That's idiot compassion. See,
Yes.
wise compassion would be, I wonder why everybody that you're dating is a narcissist. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what's really interesting. I did a TED Talk a few months ago, which was about how we're unreliable narrators of our own lives. So the stories that we tell ourselves are often very skewed, and we don't realize it. We think that our version of the story is completely accurate, and sometimes that really trips us up.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code JAMES. Daily fantasy sports made easy. So how do you start to, without seeing a therapist, how do you start to construct a narrative that's maybe a little more reliable? Or how do you kind of step out of a narrative in the stream of it just to see, what else could exist?
I think that it's really important to try to write the story from another person's point of view. So if it's about a conflict with another person, imagine what their version of the story is. Most people have good intentions, and I think that we don't realize that. We think that someone is trying to hurt us in some way. And so I think you have to think about, well, why would a person do that? And what would their story look like? And I think what I do in the TED Talk is I take a woman's letter she wrote in about her husband, and then I imagine what the other version of this letter would be. And it's a completely different story. And that happens so often. I even get in my advice column, sometimes I will get two people involved in the same situation writing in, and unbeknownst to the other. And there are these two different stories, and I start to put it together, and I think, oh my God, that's the other person in the story.
That's insane.
Isn't that insane? That has happened.
That's got to be in the TV show, that plot line.
That has actually happened. And it's so interesting because they both really want the same thing, which is they want to connect. They want to be closer to each other, and they don't know how. And they are so skewed in terms of how they perceive the other person's motivations.
How can they be closer to each other?
Well, I think you have to imagine. Well, I think in that situation, they can actually talk to each other and say, I'm curious about what is going on for you, and to hear that. Because I think that often you'll find something that you never expected. Whatever you thought was a person's reason for doing something is usually not the whole story, if any part of the story.
And so again, in your own private practice, do you feel that all this experience, now you have this book out, you're getting a lot of attention, doing a TV show, doing a podcast, what do you bring back into the therapy sessions? Like, are you able to focus on them? I'm assuming yes, but do you find the experience has changed you and the quality of the therapy you're giving?
I think everything I do is really complementary. So I think that, going around and talking to people about emotional health, as I'm doing with a lot of the book tour, is really helpful. I see patterns in terms of the kinds of questions people ask, the kinds of concerns that they have, and that complements what I see in the therapy room. I think the process of writing is really helpful. Even writing the book, it helped me to see things about those cases that I hadn't seen necessarily at the time in the same way. So I think everything that I'm doing, writing the column, helps me to help my patients. Helping my patients helps me to help the people in the column.
Okay, I have a question. What is a narcissist? Because I do hear people saying all the time their spouse or their significant other is a narcissist. I hear this all the time. So maybe there's something wrong with me that I'm listening for all the narcissist questions, but I'm just curious, what is the definition of that? I feel people overuse that word.
Yeah, they do. I think the way that people overuse, certain words like, you're so OCD, when they don't actually have OCD.
Or bipolar, I feel, is overused.
Yeah, do people say that?
Yeah, a lot of people just say, "Oh, I'm bipolar," but like when you see people who are really bipolar,
it's an actual phenomenon.
Yeah,
it's an actual diagnosis. Yeah,
crazy illness. And I don't mean crazy that the person's crazy. I mean that illness really damages people.
Yeah, if they're not treated. I mean, people who are treated with and who have bipolar disorder do really well, but they have to get the right treatment. So yeah, that's very different from casually saying, oh, you're so bipolar. I think people don't understand what that is. Bipolar is not like, used casually.
Yeah, I think people think like the Hollywood version is, oh, you're really happy sometimes and you're really sad other times. It just goes back and forth all the time. And it doesn't seem to be that at all. But I am curious, what is a narcissist?
Are you asking for a friend?
No, I'm just curious because I hear it all the time. And then I also hear sociopath all the time. So what's a narcissist and what's a sociopath?
Yes. So
he's a sociopath.
Right. So that's what happened in my book. When the boyfriend breaks up with me, my friends immediately say, he was a sociopath. How could he never have told you he didn't want to live with a kid? And by the way, I agreed, which, of course, my therapist did not. So I'll start with sociopath then, I guess. A sociopath is somebody who has lacks empathy, cannot, goes around and doesn't care about hurting other people or the feelings of other people or what happens to other people.
Is that biological, or is it like a function of how they were raised, or?
People don't really know. There's all these questions, I think, with a lot of mental illness, which is, how much is nurture and how much is nature. And I think that a lot of it is a combination of the two. So it's very rare for a person to be a sociopath. It's very rare in the population. Narcissism is also an actual diagnostic category, but remember, there are gradations of narcissism, right? So, somebody who's a little bit self-centered, that's not narcissism necessarily. But a lot of times people say, oh, that person's such a narcissist. They're so, concerned with themselves. That's more kind of self-centered. A narcissist is somebody who thinks they're better than everybody else. John, in the book, the character, I say character because I had to rename him, but the person, my patient, probably would fit the diagnostic category for narcissism.
Right, because I remember he came into your office, he's always trashing everybody else. And
everybody was an idiot. He knew better than everybody else. He was smarter than everybody else.
And he wasn't necessarily a mean guy.
No, he wasn't mean, but he was insulting. Just because he thought he was so much better than everybody else. And so narcissism is, I'm so much better. I'm so great. Everybody else is less than. And it comes from a place, ironically, of feeling less than. So it's a defense against feelings of lack of self-worth, even though the presentation is that they have so much self-worth that they're irritating.
So how do you, let's say you figure out someone's a narcissist, how do you deal with that person in either a friendship or relationship or a business context?
Yeah, I would say try not to be in a relationship with a narcissist. So how do you deal with that person in a relationship? Probably choose somebody else. Unless that person is willing to, do therapy and try to figure out what's going on. Narcissists don't show up in therapy that much because they don't think anything's wrong with them. So the way that John comes to me is he thinks, he's there to help. He needs help sort of with the irritation of managing all the idiots. And so it's not for him. It's not like, hey, I want to change and something's wrong with me. It's how do I manage all these people who are inferior to me? That's how a narcissist might end up. Or a narcissist often ends up in therapy in the context of a couple. So they'll come in and you see whether it's him or her, there is, one person has narcissistic traits and the other partner is very fed up with it. And the other partner is who brought them into therapy.
Like I can imagine, you ever see the TV show Entourage?
I haven't.
Oh, okay, because maybe the Ari character, but if you haven't seen it. But I'm trying to think of any TV character that might be, you can easily identify as a narcissist. Well, he was a TV character.
That's right. Yeah.
Is there any
a TV character?
Yeah. What about like Don Draper and Mad Men? Although I don't think.
I'm gonna. My ignorance is that right now I haven't watched a lot of television in a long time.
All right, you're off the hook on that question. All right, I have another one too, which is, and I'm sorry I'm asking like glossary questions, but this is the only time I get to ask this. Passive aggressive. What's that?
Okay, so passive aggressive is
another one I see thrown around all the time.
Passive aggressive is when you're really angry with somebody, but you're not going to tell them that you're angry, and you're going to do something that is hostile toward them, but in a very subtle way. So something passive aggressive is, like a comment under your breath, or you do something to, like passive aggressive is you're really irritated that your partner wants you to do something that you don't want to do, so you're going to come 30 minutes late. And then you're going to be like, oh, there was so much traffic. That's very passive aggressive. You were angry that you had to go to this thing, and that's the conversation you should have had, not I'm angry, but I'm not going to tell my partner and I'm just going to show up late.
So, hey, A, what do you do if you're passive aggressive? And B, how do you deal with someone who's passive aggressive? So I think I'm probably a little passive aggressive. I'm always afraid to confront people with and say what I really think if I don't like something. And I think let's call it one of my relatives is passive aggressive. So we always actually have
one of your relatives. Would that be a parent?
No, actually, not a parent. My parents don't talk to me. But when we're together, it's actually all fine because we're both passive aggressive, so we don't say anything bad about anything.
But are you being aggressive? So it sounds like you're both passive, but I don't know that you're doing anything aggressive. So what do you mean you're both? What's an example of you being passive aggressive?
Okay, I'm probably passive, and this person's probably passive aggressive.
And so what does this person do that's passive aggressive?
This person might lie as opposed to telling me, "Oh, I really don't want to go to that," or "I really am doing this." I don't know. She might lie in certain situations where it really wouldn't have been a big deal if she just told the truth.
Right. Yeah.
And then I'm passive, so I don't confront her on it.
Yeah. But it doesn't sound like you're passive aggressive.
I'm probably not, no. But how do I deal with someone who's passive aggressive if I'm passive?
So you can say to them, "Hey, it seems like you it seems like you really don't want to do this thing, or it seems like you really don't want to go to this thing," and see what they say. Sometimes just getting it out there gives them permission to say it.
Yeah, I've tried that, and they'd be like, no, I really have this thing, and I know,
And you don't believe it.
Yeah, I know they don't. So, but it's hard for me to like just say you're lying.
That doesn't sound so passive aggressive though. That sounds like the person's trying to let you down nicely.
Yeah.
Passive aggressive is more like, "Hey, will you walk my dog this week?" "Sure, I will." And then like you then all of a sudden, the dog gets off the leash when you're walking because you were consciously or not, probably, outside of your awareness, you were so angry that like you didn't fasten the leash and now the dog has disappeared. That's passive aggressive. It's like there's some hostile act that happens. Doesn't sound like your relative is committing some kind of hostile act. It sounds
you're
like
probably right. Yeah. So what do you do again? So your suggestion is though, if someone is passive aggressive, just kind of like try to air out as much truth as possible and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, and in a nice way, not like, "I can't believe you don't want to come to this thing." "I can't believe you don't want to walk my dog." It's "Hey, you seem a little irritated by it."
Yeah, I guess the guilt trip doesn't work. Is what you're saying? Like guilting someone.
No, the guilt trip does not work.
Because so guilting does seem to happen a lot between parents and children. Like, "Oh, I can't believe you don't want to come visit me," or blah blah blah. With children, and maybe this is related to the passive aggressive question. What's the importance of boundaries with children?
Yeah. "I can't believe you don't want to come visit me," by the way, is not passive aggressive. That's just manipulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. So parents could be manipulative.
We all can.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
but what was your question?
So the question is, what are the right boundaries to put on kids? I know it's a very broad question, but like, I tend to always want my kids to be happy, which is not always, for instance, the correct goal. And so it's hard for me to put boundaries around kids.
So are they monsters?
No, they're actually very, very good, but they just, I don't know, they're very nice, polite kids, but maybe I'm worried when they actually are in a difficult situation as adults, they might not be able to know how to handle it. And I've seen them not be able to handle some situations as well as I think they should be able to.
How old are they?
17 and 20.
So what are some situations that they haven't handled well?
If someone says no to them about, they feel overly rejected or unfairly rejected.
Right, because they're not used to hearing that. Yeah. And also, it sounds like maybe they don't have a lot of practice dealing with their disappointment.
Yeah.
And that's something,
that's very true.
That's a reason why it's important for parents to know that it's okay if your kids don't like you in a moment or they don't like a decision that you've made and you see their disappointment. It's really hard for us as parents to look at our kids and say, "Oh, I just caused you to feel pain," right? But at the same time, they need to know that it will pass. Feelings are like the weather. They kind of like weather systems. They blow in, they blow out. And your kids need to learn that just because I'm sad now or just because I'm disappointed now doesn't mean I'm going to feel that way in an hour or a day.
I think the key thing there is, for me, feeling comfortable in them not liking me for a short amount of time. Because it's hard. I'm a divorced parent, so I don't always see them. So I feel like if they don't like me for a day, that might turn into 2 months because they could choose not to see me. They could just stay elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So, but I think that's really important though.
Well,
to
that's
get
really
comfortable with that.
common with divorced parents. I think divorced parents, because I think there's this extra feeling of pressure that, you have a limited time with your kids. And so a lot of people feel like, well, I want them to enjoy the time that they have with me, but you also have to be a parent during that time.
Well, Lori, once again, I've completely used you as my own personal therapist right on the podcast. And I'm so happy that maybe you should talk to somebody. I'm thinking the title, right?
Maybe you should talk to someone.
Maybe you should talk to someone. I'm so happy
I
it's
think
doing
you have.
so well.
I think you have a block.
No, since I'm 52 now. Since I turned 50, I literally cannot remember anything. And on the podcast in particular, I will have just read the book and I'll forget the name of the person sitting across from me and the title of the book. But I'll remember the content of the book, so I'll be able to do the whole.
You did. You knew it very well.
Yeah, I'll be able to do the entire podcast as long as I don't have to say the person's name or the title of the book. And it's really hard for me to remember the subtitle as well. But anyway, maybe you should talk to someone, author of that, and it's a huge bestseller. It's the third time you're on the podcast. I've always have such a fun time talking to you. You're also doing this podcast, Dear Therapist. You write Dear Therapist for The Atlantic. Those columns are always great. I always read all of those that come out. And now I just learned you're doing a TV show. When do you think that will come out?
I don't know yet. We're about to get the script, so I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Is it already been approved by a network? Like it's happening?
I think it is. I can't really say yet.
That's so great. Congratulations on that. And when that comes out, come on the podcast again and we'll talk about that.
Will do. Thanks so much. It's always fun to talk to you.
Are you going to write another book?
I am. I'm just selling my next book.
With Suzanne, our mutual agent?
With our mutual agent, yes.
Can you say what that's about?
I can, yes. It's a book about how we love. And maybe you should talk to someone. I brought individuals into the therapy room. And my practice is predominantly couples now, and it has been going in that direction for years. And I am going to write about how we love through the lens of the couples that I see in my practice.
Oh my God, I can't wait to read that one. So you're going to have to come back for that as well.
Yeah, happy to.
All future occurrences of Lori Gottlieb on the podcast. Thanks once again for coming on the show. And how should people find you other than reading your book or watching your podcast or watching your TV show or reading your next book?
They can watch my TED Talk, which I think is really useful for people. So they can go to TED.com and look me up. They can go to my website, LoriGottlieb.com, and they can follow me at Lori Gottlieb1 on Twitter.
And what's your address? No, I'm just kidding. Thanks so much.
I'm like, what? Thank you.
Thanks.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.